Welcome to Chad's Silversmithing. First, thanks for visiting my channel. I appreciate you watching this video. It helps me out a great deal if you hit the like button before you leave. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, I'd appreciate it. Also, consider subscribing to my channel. I have lots of content now. I think I'm over 80 videos, and I think most of it's useful, and the quality of the videos has gotten drastically better as I've learned. So go ahead and subscribe if you want to, and I also have a way to contribute to my continued production of these kind of videos. If you want to hit the buy me a coffee up at the top corner, that'd be great. Thanks in advance if you do that, but it's certainly not necessary. I have this rectangular malachite stone that I've been sitting on for years, and I think I'm going to make a long ring out of it with real angular lines. So that's what we're going to do today. So stay tuned. So here's that malachite that I was talking about. Let's make sure I got this thing positioned correctly. It's kind of a pretty rectangular malachite. For the project, I'm going to need some 26 gauge sterling sheet, 3/16 inch fine silver bezel strip, a little bit of 12 gauge square wire, a little bit of 10 gauge square wire. I think that's, I also need some 18 gauge sterling silver sheet for the band. First we'll make a bezel for this guy. Kind of what I was thinking here. Got this guy in the middle, stone with a bezel. I was thinking about putting a piece of that 12 gauge here, and then a piece of the 10 gauge, just a little square of it soldered onto the ends here like that, and then maybe do I haven't decided how wide I'm going to make it yet, but a band that's going to rest on top of out of that 18 gauge thick sheet. We'll see how it looks. I don't know. Never made one quite like this. I think it'll probably end up looking pretty cool. I like geometric stuff, so. You never, when you're making an angular bezel like this, you never want to have it end at a corner. That's a kind of a rookie mistake. Don't be that person. I suggest you do it somewhere along one of the long sides of whatever shape you're doing. Have a lot of excess space with the bezel on these ones. I want it to be relatively snug. I'm going to use this as a size gauge. My little sketch here. Just trying to get these pretty close to the same. Like I get one the right length, then I solder the other, or file the other one to try and get it to that length, and then it's too short, so I have to file the other one shorter, and so on and so forth. Close enough. For this, I'm going to basically make a little cube. The hard part is we'll be filing this other end flat. So I think I'm going to try and hold it in my pair of pliers. This sometimes is effective, sometimes is not. But definitely my little hands here struggle with stuff like this. So try that and see if we can't. It's not perfect, but it's good enough, I think. Okay, in the past, in some of my videos, I've made the bezel completely, removed all of the excess, and then soldered some decorations to the outside. This time I'm going to do a slightly different thing, and that's where I'm going to cut a little bit bigger piece of sheet, big enough to accommodate these decorations that I'm going to put on here. And then after I solder them down to the sheet and to the side of the bezel, then I'll trim off the excess. I think it'll give me a little bit cleaner lines if I do that with this one. I was trying to get a real geometric shape kind of thing, which it looks like I still have some filing to do since I'm not very good at filing straight tonight. Kind of looks Art Deco almost. Kind of like Art Deco stuff. I'm trying to decide how close I want these to come to the end. I think about like that, maybe. And then make the band about the width from here to here. I think that's a good idea. Go that route. Cut a piece of 26 gauge sheet for the bottom here. What we're going to do, make sure there's enough for the decorations and the bezel on this one, and leave a little bit extra space in anyway. I usually leave about 1/8 of an inch extra on each side, just so you got plenty of room to work with. could solder these on, like solder the bezel on first and then do these, but you could do it all in one go if you want. See how we do with that one. Or should I do something like a diamond at the end? That would be weird. Maybe I could offset these ones too. I don't know. That might be kind of cool. Better that way. I don't know, so many choices. Keep moving everything out of position here. I think I like it better over this way. I think maybe I'll do it like that. Sometimes you change plans in the middle of things. I do that pretty frequently. We'll give that a shot and see how it goes. So that flux will kind of glue everything in place for me temporarily. It gets in that sticky stage like that. I don't have to worry too much about the messiness from the solder, if only because I'm going to be trimming off any excess sheet anyway, and on the inside here that'll be covered by the stone, so no worries there. All right. Just making sure everything's touching where it's supposed to. We'll give this a shot. The sheet on the bottom is the hardest part to get up to temperature. It's kind of protected from the heat by the bezel and these other pieces here. So I'm almost going to actively avoid other parts and hit mostly the sheet. The other parts will get hot enough just being under the flame here. Cool that off and take a look at it and see how it looks. Okay. So I'm looking to see how clean the solder joints are. It looks like I got a seam everywhere I wanted one. It'll be easier to tell once it's cleaned up a little bit, but I'm confident enough to where I can cut off the excess sheet now, I think, and use the file to smooth it up against where it's supposed to be. It looks like everything's pretty close to where I wanted it. So that'll be my next stage. So that's all soldered down. I just need to trim off the excess now. I would just suggest get it as close as you can. And I normally, if I caught one of my students using the wire cutters to cut some sheet, I would chastise them a little bit because generally it doesn't cut sheet very well. However, in these little corners like this, rather than filing it all out, sometimes you can just snip the large majority of that out that way. And it's hard to get shears into those cavities like that. So it'll save you a little bit of filing. Unless you like filing, in which case, file away. I actually kind of like filing, but for something like this, it'll save some time. Okay, so I got it mostly trimmed off, but then I can just use the file to finish it up. Trying to keep these as angular as I can. So I may go back with a Dremel and clean them up even more, so I don't accidentally file too much off or something. But you want to make sure when you're soldering stuff down onto some sheet next to the bezel that you actually get a good solder seam all the way down that. Otherwise it looks amateurish. Nobody wants their stuff to look amateurish. You gotta be a little careful when you're filing these kind of things. If you hit the top of the bezel too much, it becomes pretty thin and fragile. So be cautious about that. I was getting a little close on this spot right there, so I'm gonna back off and use the Dremel for the rest, I think. Alright. Mostly anyway. Okay, be back in a second. Alright, I got it kind of cleaned up with the Dremel. I sharpened some of the angles of these things a little bit because they'd gotten a little ground down from the file and stuff like that, so I think I got it neatened up a bit. Now we need to cut a piece of this 18 gauge sheet. And I have to grab a corner here where I've got a factory edge. And I think I'm going to do it, actually, I'm going to do it slightly narrower than the distance between here and here. So it gives an additional kind of step, I think, that width. So, it'll be a better width. I'm going to figure out what size we want to make this. How about a size 9, just for giggles. I'm going to go right around a 9 here and then add about an extra 1/8 of an inch, maybe slightly more even, in order to compensate for the different geometry of using a thick piece of sheet versus a thin piece of paper. And that should get us pretty close to a 9 then. So I can just line that up there. This is thicker sheet, so I'm going to use these tin snips. But I'm going to cut outside the line because it leaves teeth marks. You could just use a saw if you wanted to, but I'm not a big fan of saws. I will use one when I have to, but that is not my primary skill. this back out. I'll spend a little time removing this edge here that has the teeth marks. So I think I'm going to go ahead and make this into a band. Banner like this. The reason I flipped it over that way was to ensure that after the solder flowed here, I heated it back up while it was tipped over this way so I could direct the heat to the outside edge here in order to pull the solder all the way through the seam. If you ever have solder joints that break on you like that, you might try that. Alright, so I'm just going to file off the excess on the inside here. I debated about putting a texture on this, but I think with the overall kind of feel of this one, it's clean lines and angular shapes, so I'm just going to keep it pretty basic. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and round that out. Ring mandrel here. So I normally do this on my knee, but for the sake of the camera, I'll do it right here. There's typically a little excess solder on the outside here. I'm going to smooth that out a little bit. Although that's probably, when I do go to solder it onto this, since I already have some solder there, if I set it down like this, when I go to solder it on, I may not even have to add any solder, but we'll play it by ear. If we need to, we can. So, and also, right here, moving these sides up if you didn't have them as straight as you wanted. I'm going to do my best to get this centered on here. This is my very worst part. In order to keep this stable, I might file this a little bit flat right there so it doesn't roll. I want to try and get it right on that solder joint if I can. Doesn't have to be perfect, just a little flatter spot maybe. Okay, sorry I got to lean in front of the camera here to line this up. That actually looks pretty close. Let's give that a shot and see how it comes out. You can see if it's on there. Actually, it looks relatively straight. Let me cool it off and look at it. looks pretty straight. That's better than I usually do. Okay, so I'm going to heat this up a little bit and let it pickle for a while. And then I may do some of the polishing in advance since this is malachite. And malachite's pretty soft, and I don't want to scratch it up. Especially since I'm shaky today. So I'll heat this up and let it pickle for a while. So I did most of the, make sure I'm in picture here. So I did most of the polishing before I put the stone in, just because malachite's a little bit soft and I don't want to run the risk of scratching this stone, because I don't have a replacement for it to put in the setting, so I wanted to make sure I didn't scratch it, or at least do my best not to. So, but yeah, it's going to go in there. So I need to cut probably 1 or 2 pieces of tag board to lift it up a little bit. You want these to be in here loosely. If you don't get them in loosely, then part of the tag board will ride up the side a little bit, and then your stone won't sit flat when you go to set it. I tell people that a lot, but they forget sometimes. So that to me sits too deep. I can see there's quite a bit of bezel sticking up above that curve. So I'm going to put at least 1 more piece of tag board in there. I'd rather it was too far up in the bezel than too far down, because if it's too far up, it's easier to get the stone out in order to reduce the amount of stuff behind it. So I think that's pretty close, but it needs to sit just a tiny bit lower. So somebody asked me about the depth of bezels, and I use 3/16 inch, but I usually file it down quite a bit. This is a relatively thick stone. It's malachite, which is delicate, so I'm going to leave a relatively tall bezel for this one. On rings, I don't like them to stick up that high normally, but for this one, I think we need to. I'm going to peel just a little bit off of this here. I think we're close. It needs to be just a little bit thinner. Yeah, that gives me just a little bit more room to work with. Now, one of the things when you're dealing with corners on like an angular bezel like this, the bezel material, when you try to fold it in over a corner, there's too much metal there and you're trying to compress it into too small of a space. And so it has a tendency to wrinkle and fold on itself. And one trick you can do in order to reduce that chance of that happening is really just a little tiny bit on the corners, thin out the bezel. You don't want to get too crazy, but it just makes a little bit less metal to compress into that area. Certainly don't file all the way through. And some of these, I did 1 or 2 earlier, and then I remembered I was going to show you guys this. So now we'll just go ahead and do my normal setting routine, but I'm going to start on the ends here and then do the corners. I'm actually kind of mashing them in straight in on the corners there. It helps too if you can push down on the stone. Got rid of most of the excess space now, and those corners aren't pooching or anything. So now I can start burnishing, which is of course where you rub that top edge with malachite. I don't want to slip and hit the stone too much, because if you rub, I rub pretty hard when I'm doing this. And if I slip, it'll definitely scratch the stone. sometimes when you're trying to get a real angular look, I noticed after I started making this that this stone isn't an exact rectangle. It's got a slight angle going that way, so at best I can conceal that a little bit with the setting, but I'm going to have to live with that, I guess. So I will do a little final cleanup on that and take some pictures of it for you at the end of the video. I'll show you what it looks like. So, but generally that's the idea. That was the geometric rectangular ring. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button before you leave. I'd love it if you'd subscribe to my channel. We just passed 1,000 subscribers, and that's making me very happy. So up till now I've been doing this for free, and so if you feel like you want to contribute to my channel, I'd really appreciate it. And there's a link up at top on the right hand corner that says buy me a cup of coffee. So anything you can donate would be great and helps. So thanks for watching. Happy silversmithing. Take care.